I've been listening to freaky sounds like that for like the last 12 or 14 hours or 10, I don't know, 12 maybe, I don't know. But that pacifies me and gives me my peace of mind that I derive from sounds like that rather than the clamor of chaos that abounds and the mass insanity going on these days. So you're not going to find that here. You'll find real insanity or remnants of it or what's left of it, as my story goes. But so anyway, what I wanted to talk about was like an overview of what's happened to me with this these dangerousness effects of antipsychotic drug medications in particular. I was just reading where 1973 they knew some of this existed. In 1964 they knew the initial disorder showing up later after using antipsychotic drugs for a number of years, or a short period of time even. It said a few weeks at a high enough dose can cause these kind of disorders on the original first generation antipsychotics. But I've taken enough of those. Back in 1975 I was diagnosed in December, and I was on them since then. And I was stelazine first, and then thorazine a year and a half or two later for a year or two at that time. It enabled me to work better and function and be on my own in the city of Tampa in the 1970s. I worked every day and went to work every day and worked a day, and they liked my work and promoted me, and I paid my own rent and had my own duplex, and was into electronic music studying then, and but what went wrong? Well, then there was a complication with the thorazine, and emergency room physicians told me to quit taking it, and then it was too late because it was like that. I was gone for the next like 20 or 30 years, for however many years you want to count. Because after I got the initial medication that made me well, I still wasn't well because I didn't develop during those earlier decades of my life where I was still affected by the illness, impairing my judgment. I wrote my book, earlier in my book, the first thing that goes with this illness is your good judgment. Your judgment goes wacko, then it goes for your behavior and your mouth running and who knows what schizophrenic people talk about. If you want to read about what goes on in schizophrenic minds, it's in my book, In the Grip of Paranoid Schizophrenia, 3rd edition. Your best bet for the electronic ebook anyway is Lulu, the publisher, LUW.com, or the printing press where it's published or whatever. But that describes what psychotic minds go through, and I don't have problems like that these days, and haven't for 30 years this year. So, but the problem is, okay, so I 30 years ago, I get the medication this year that made me well from being terribly profusely psychotic. It blew everybody's mind. You can see the interview with Susan Culbertson, the social worker at the time, who was the assistant director of social work at the state hospital, who was in charge of contacting the government because of me contacting them contacting the hospital, and it was her job to contact. She came here and interviewed me with her husband for my 25th anniversary, which is 5 years ago now, I guess, but because it's 30th anniversary this year. But that appears on YouTube too, and it had 292 views. I just saw it the other day, and so it's a 25-minute long interview, but she corroborates everything in the book that the whole story is true. So what I've been through, and the only written records of my whole psychiatric history are in the book that I wrote, In the Grip of Paranoid Schizophrenia, 3rd edition. The 3rd edition was a key change because there were like 2 stories in one before that. It didn't make sense. It was more the fact that I studied philosophy as a young adult for a few years while I was working on going to school at night school, and so I did that. I brought myself up that way to think that way, be a thinker that way, and I'm kind of like my favorite philosopher was Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche's I've read dozens of times his paper Beyond Good and Evil, and his paper Superman, Super Ego. I used to read them in the moonlight in Florida, out in a lawn chair in a full moonlight, and big thick philosophy books. So, he challenges moral dictates, you might say, and tells you to go subjectively thinking on your own find your own morals or whatever, your own sense of morality. Basically, is what I derived out of a recent article about him. But I continue to study that stuff. But so how this interacts with me neuropsychiatrically is that okay. So I find out. So they first discovered medicine for schizophrenia or other psychosis can cause psychosis, two other illness conditions too that respond to antipsychotics. It affects 1 in every 50 people altogether. Schizophrenic 1 in every 100 people, but 1 in every 50 people has psychosis. So they'll need this kind of medication, and this can do this to you. So the earlier drugs did it to me, and like I said, the Thorazine did it to me the worst in 1978, when I was working. And in 79, I knew I had a problem, and it was Tardive Dyskinesia, the first known in 1964 permanent side effect of antipsychotic drug use, where they burn the nerves out of your fingertips and your toes and your face, your expression, and there was no known cure for this condition. And I knew I had it in 1979 because I had to get off the medication from the emergency room doctor, and I began shaking and my heart palpitating and I looked it up and researched it. Somehow found out it was Tardive Dyskinesia from a neighbor possibly who studied that stuff and was older than me, and different neighbors that worked in that line of work and had degrees in that, so they might have helped me. But if I understand that, but I really don't remember. But I knew in '79 I had that, and when I mentioned it at the clinic where they wanted me to go outpatient, they threatened me with the state hospital, and so I came to Ohio, where my family had come back to from where my stepmother was from. I was living with initially in Tampa at age 15 on, and so I grew up there, So it was fun going to college and working every day and driving across town and doing what I did, furniture refinisher for so long, and going into people's homes and carrying couches over my back and load them into the van if I have to, and so they were lightweight ones. They weren't sofa sleeper ones, but chairs or recliners or whatever. If I had to go back to the shop, I had to take it back to the shop. I did take it back to the shop for the boss to do the upholstery. So I worked at one time, and I enjoyed it being on my own, and being able to acquire things like these synthesizers like I've gotten in later years. But anyways, it was a fun thing for me to do. But then, like, the psychosis eroded all that. So I knew I had tardive dyskinesia in '79. I came here first week of 1980, and I had a prediction injection in me that enabled me to drive here, I guess. But it also prevented me from learning piano to play in piano class in college when I was studying electronic music, synthesizers. I understand, but I didn't understand. My fingers wouldn't move on those early drugs. I'm shaking them now, like moving them like I'm playing piano or something, But I don't have the fingering for piano. For synthesizer electronic keyboards, there's a difference between the finger hardness of the finger. Each different finger can be different, for different kind of playing, and I can't do that on a piano. But I can play different cool things on groovy things on synthesizers. But or set them to cycle like they were there, that I started at the beginning. But so anyway, I came to Ohio, and then I wandered into Pittsburgh in October of 1980. Got locked up there in Western Psychiatric Treatment Clinic at the University of Pittsburgh, and a month later, when they found out they weren't getting paid, they discharged me immediately. My dad had to take me home, come and get me from Ohio, which was not that far really, all that really long, great. Well, it's a long, it's a ways to go, but when you get around, it's easy. It's not very far, but I don't get around anymore, so it was a long ways. But I'm done getting around. So how did this happen then? So then the following year in June or May, or I'm not sure when it was, in 1981, I was picked up by the police at my dad's house and shackled and handcuffed and carried to the state hospital again. And what was I doing? Just yoga in the yard at midnight under the moonlight? They didn't like that. And in fact, I took vitamins. So, but I was convicted of for a 6-month stay that time. And they put me on this garbage called L'Occitane. I don't know what the generic name is for it, but it was garbage. They kept me on that from like 1981 to 1994. They kept insisting putting me on that same drug. It didn't really work entirely all the way. This other stuff, newer stuff, generation I was waiting for 15 years worked better and more pronounced, and it was obvious to everybody, like in the Susan Culbertson interview, our YouTube interview, it amazed everybody how well this new medication made me a different person who I am, and not the psychotic identity I was. So that medication, risperidone, generic name, was I was on it for ever since then, since 30 years now. I've been on it. Okay, that I learned a few years ago. That's where my hair went. It was because 10 years after that, I was doing research. Internet had gone high speed, and I was able to get web pages in fast. So I studied a bunch of obscure things, among them schizophrenia and medical journal studies. And I learned that in some of the studies about antipsychotics, that one called aripiprazole, branded at Vilify, was said to be the third generation antipsychotic, and then it only works on the brain. Well, wait, let me back up. The first generation antipsychotics worked on the whole brain. That's where the psychotic side effects came from. Worked on the whole brain. Second generation only worked on parts of the brain it needed to, and not on the rest of the brain, so less side effects. But this aripiprazole was billed as the third generation because it only works on parts of the brain it needs to, and then again only when it needs to. So my thinking to the MD at the time psychiatrist, was that if we add this a little bit, a tiny amount of this, it might drastically help my parts of my brain that aren't getting worked on. So she agreed with me, and we tried a 5 milligram dosage for, I'm not sure if 6 months or I saw her every 3 or 4 months, 3 months, I guess at that point. So maybe we tried 6 months or so, or 9 months, and she went up it to 10 milligrams, and we were happier there, both happier there, and so we left it there. And later I learned through reading medical journals, one titled "Characteristics of Novel Antipsychotics," that risperidone causes suppression in verbal fluency, and with the Abilify added back, I'm able to conduct conversation faster and verbally think more of my higher verbal IQ that I have than average. So there are different kinds of IQs they graph, But anyways, so I started on the risperidone in 1994, November, and I never missed it. I couldn't. It was too serious. The condition, as it's described in my book. I don't need to go into all that. It's in other videos too. But how psychotic I was, for how long, and what craziness I went on. It's a lifetime ago now, or several lifetimes ago. But I've had to take these medications in order to make that happen. My life happened in a peaceable, self-accomplishing, together way. Not instead of psychotic, crazy and delusional, spotting off craziness and mailing things to the government and craziness. It's all in my book if you want to read that story. But In the Grip of Paranoid Schizophrenia, 3rd edition, lulu.com, lu.com, for the ebook only. For the ebook, there's only there, but it's cheaper. So then about 10 years later, then we start on the aripiprazole and added, and nobody knew to watch for this because I discovered in later years. I knew I had tardive dyskinesia at that point, but the antipsychotics cover up the damage they do as they do it, so you don't know you have it until you quit taking it. So I found out when an emergency room doctor told me to go take it, and I found this out. I had this damage. So taking antipsychotics tended to cover it up and keep it from showing, or my fingers from shaking, but it made it worse at the same time. The original generation of antipsychotics, the tardive dyskinesia it's called. But then, so when a drug came out for it, we were searching for a medication for side effects that came back after many years on the same antipsychotic combination of Abilify and risperidone, and then Abilify added to it. After like a lot of years, I was having some side effects come back of drooling and fingers cramping, like weird, like when I go to type or something, or pick up a pen or whatever, stylus or whatever. But oh man, I need my nicotine. Where's my nicotine? Fuck, I don't have my nicotine on me. It's in my pocket, isn't it? Isn't it? Yes, it is. Well, like I wrote about, covered in my book too, there's been a lot of research done on nicotine receptor stimulation helping in schizophrenia memory deficits. So I was on a combination of antipsychotics for like all these years since, and so then we were looking for a drug for the drooling and the muscle cramps that came back a year ago, I guess over a year ago. We tried one drug at 19, and that didn't work. It was an old standard I used to take it for side effects in the 70s, but it caused me a problem, a bedwetting, and it was obvious. I knew quit taking it. And they called in. They said, "Yeah, to do that, quit taking it." So but then I didn't get anything else until like a few years later, and it drove me nuts a year ago in 23, early 23. It was caused me to act really weird. But as a side effect drug for this for the side effect of antipsychotics. So these drugs are worse than antipsychotics themselves. Some of these older drugs they still use, So eventually we found something for that. But in the process, I was introduced to Austedo, however you want to pronounce it, which it's for the Tardive Dyskinesia, which caused, as I was increased on the dosage until I was optimized, the word is titrated. I did a bunch of videos like a year ago. It's been 11 months ago I started on it. It was September, 6th of September 2024 will be a year I've been on it, and that's less than a month away now, or a little over a month away. But so being on the full dosage and then changing from the extended release to the immediate release was the best thing because I wanted to skew it because it would put me to sleep every night, and I didn't like that because my better intellectual work since I was 19 years old and on my own was at night. So on my own time, So in my own time. So all these years went by, and then I got on this drug for we were looking for. She tried me on this for the drooling and the tremors, but really, I wondered what this drug was. It was so different, the way these neuropsychiatric drugs can change how you think, feel, perceive the world around you, yourself, and how you think, react, and everything, about you, your behavior, how you can feel about yourself, see yourself in the world around you, and is all affected by the way these neuropsychiatric drugs work on your brain, and anyone can make you totally different from who you are on other ones. So I'm balanced the way I need to be because of who I am. I'm happy with it, and the doctors always have been too. When I communicate compared to my written record of how psychotic I really was, it's two different people. You have to imagine, realize when you read that. So, but it's because I take these drugs, though, the antipsychotic drugs, that I stay well, So then, after the tardive dyskinesia, I find out that one drug she starts me on is for tardive dyskinesia, which I'd forgotten about because it was always said to be permanent, in all the literature, So I wrote about it in most of my books, I think, but I otherwise forgot about it because it was permanent, there was no cure for it. So then I studied this drug. I was almost for tardive dyskinesia, and that was an interesting response. I had all those videos I documented every time I titrated up another notch, and how it affected the nerves coming on my arms. With tardive dyskinesia is the burning away of the nerves from the fingertips, the extremities, the fingertips, to the toes, the feet, and the arms and legs, and the face and head. Facial expression is expected too in this condition, and your handwriting is atrocious and beyond help. And so on the drug for tardive dyskinesia, if I'm composed and not stressed or pressured and I'm not trying to do it quickly, I can make my handwriting legible. But it requires a composed effort. But quickly, though, it's impossible to read it. It's still, and it has been that way for decades. Since all these drugs they fed me, I had to take it to remain psychotic. There was no other alternative. And why isn't there is a good question. I have another question I can raise later. So it was a combination of these. Then I was studying the tardive dyskinesia drug and researching it on Google Scholar Search, on Googling medical journals, searching for and I stumbled on there's a total of 5 tardive movement disorders caused by antipsychotic drugs. I think it was 5 or 6. 3 of them, anyway, I can't pronounce or even learn to spell. But the second one, called tardive dystonia, besides tardive dyskinesia and tardive dystonia, causes scoliosis and other abnormal movements of the spine and conditions related to abnormal posturing and stuff. So permanently, though, but people who, the ironic thing is nobody knows about this. It prescribes these drugs that I've checked with. I mean, how wide of a sample could I take? I'm not possible taking a sample. But I mean, so it's easily found on Google Scholar searches if you type in tardive dystonia, scoliosis, antipsychotic drugs, and you'll find all kind of documentation on it. And if you add the word FDA or American Psychiatric Association, and then you might find who published what, where, then there too. So these people have known about this, and they don't tell their own members, the American Psychiatric Association. And what gets me, the FDA knows this too, obviously too. And all along. Since 1973, it was first mentioned. Tardive dystonia. I just read this evening. I thought it was 1983, but previously I read. But 73, they first mentioned. Somebody first mentioned this condition. So, and still, doctors today don't know about this. This is insane. On the doctor's part, not on my part, but the patient's part, you have no choice but to take these kind of drugs that could do this to you in certain small percentage of cases, which I think was like 2 to 4% of people get the tardive dystonia, scoliosis, or there's other words I can't pronounce. I've looked up in Google to see what they are, but the movement of the spine here and there and forward and backwards, and I'm trying to bend forward to the microphone now though, but so anyway, so this is what has caused all the startling. It's aged me a lot. I think I look a lot older now than I ever looked before, just from knowing this about my whole lifetime now. I fit the profile. The general fit profile says when you're on antipsychotic drugs, especially with old generation use, and then on a newer generation, they can cause this scoliosis from the tardive dystonia, and the other movement disorders. I can't even. I have to look them up again and Google where words to see what they are. But I don't think I don't know I'm not affected either. But so the scoliosis, if they know to watch for it, like another paper I found, and I have proof of this printed to take to the neurologist this month and discuss this. The exact combination I was on, risperidone and Abilify or aripiprazole added to it. The 10 years later, in my case, is what was 20 years ago now, and it was about then that my back condition started. My back problem. I knew something was going on with my back, but nobody got the idea because nobody knew. The psychiatrists didn't know, the MDs didn't know, the primary didn't know, and anybody else I saw didn't know anything about it. The two could be related, the antipsychotics and the scoliosis. This paper I read this in, it's about the Abilify added to the risperidone. It was a young lady who was a 31-year-old lady, I believe, who was psychiatric institutional inpatient for psychosis, schizoaffective disorder, I think, and they discharged her on 30 milligrams of Abilify, and so then 8 weeks later she presented by walking sideways, curved over, bent over, and they examined her and found out it was scoliosis, so they stopped the Abilify, and a few weeks later, she was straightened back up again, and a few months later, the scoliosis was completely reversed. Now, if they would have known that to take me off that would have probably not happened to my back. But nobody knew. Why? This is the thing. The FDA puts out alerts. Anybody can sign up for them. It's at drugs.com, drugs, drugs.com, and you sign up for the newsletter. Every warning or an alert or recall or anything having to do with tainted or recalls, especially, or warnings about medications. The FDA puts out alerts anywhere from a couple of times a week to once every week or a few every 2 weeks or whatever. A while goes by, but anytime they come up with something, they alert everybody to. They put out general alerts on that network. Anybody can read those and see what it applies to your own medication. That's why I read it. Anyways, there's no excuse why they don't put out an alert on this to all physicians and people who take these kind of drugs or prescribe these kind of drugs, that this tardive dystonia and scoliosis is something that should be gauged, they say in the literature on this, by doctors who are not up on this because they're not taught this in school. And they don't look at this until the official explanation by the primary is it's obscure unless you look for it. But none of the doctors, MDs, and practitioners, nurse practitioners by doctor, psychiatrically or have heard of this condition until I pointed it out to them with Google Scholar search results. So this is very startling to all of us that this is even possible. Who would think that scoliosis of the back, curvature of the spine, could be connected to antipsychotic drug use? Well, this is what happened, I believe, to me, because they said when they diagnosed me with the scoliosis 6.5 years ago, that when I turned 60, that it should have been I had it as a kid, and I didn't. Like I told you before, I said a while ago, earlier, that I when I was working when I was 19 and 20, I was carrying couches over my back and putting them in a van, the long maxi van, and taking them back to the shop, and chairs and recliners and stuff, And when I first moved here, the first 20 years, the 40 years I lived here this year, basically, essentially, but I used to carry a laundry bag, even one over each shoulder, up to the laundry room, clear up there, and I can't even walk all the way up there now to get my mail because of scoliosis. That's how bad my back is. I can't walk very far, so I don't try to go anywhere. Just if a physical therapist says don't go out without assistance. So I walk with my other home aid, my passport home aid, who helps me with things around home here, get done that my back just would cripple me and sear me in pain and keep me from functioning, put me in bed, sending it at its worst, but asleep and then gone and out of pain is the only way to beat it when it gets really that bad, but which it can, and it differs every day. So anyway, so how long? This is I work for 26 minutes, 27 minutes. I didn't mean for this to be this long, but so I still don't know how to process this. I'm going to see a neurologist, and I'd like him to see me or her, whoever it is. I'm not sure, but to see me every 3-4 months or 3 times a year or whatever, maybe would be appropriate to monitor me in the physical therapy that only this responds to, because it's already formed and irreversible at this point. My primary treatment says so. So if the neurologist wants to keep an eye on how this is doing, but we can't take me off the Abilify because my brain works, who I am as a person, identity, and intellect is too much critical to the way I'm medicated right now, and have been all along. So that's the analysis of the overview of what's happening. But in my case, and I'll find out more when I see the neurologist and let you know. Thanks for your interest. Peace and love to everybody out there.